All right. Thank you all for being here today. We are here with three moms, Kelly, Carly, and Liana. They are all moms of children born with an omphalocele, ranging in age of 4.5 to about 5 years old. We'll start here with Kelly. She has a 4.5-year-old girl, and she is a special education consultant, and she's going to share her story with us today.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's been a little while since I've been in a group, so it's nice to see everybody. Yes, so I have Aubrey's 4.5, and my story is quite opposite from what was just shared. I actually was having a lot of bleeding early on in pregnancy. It turns out I had a hematoma that was bleeding, and we didn't know, but I had a lot of early ultrasound. So actually, at about 10 weeks is when I was given the official diagnosis of an omphalocele. So we knew pretty much the whole pregnancy that something was going on. Um, so we had been going to our local maternity. I'm in Lancaster County, I'm sorry, Pennsylvania. And we mostly went to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP, for all of our care. Around 20 weeks is when we were transferred to them from our local maternal fetal medicine here. At my 20-week ultrasound here, they kind of thought that there was also a heart defect that we needed to get checked out. So that's why we went to CHOP at that point. And they did all the scans that they possibly could. And they didn't see any heart issues, just the omphalocele, and it was actually pretty small in size. It is considered a giant still just because there was some liver involvement, but she was born at CHOP in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. So that was a little hard to navigate. It was just my husband and I that were allowed to be in the NICU with her. So my family didn't get to meet her until she was about 1 month old when we brought her home. Um, so while we were in the hospital, she was born via C-section at 38 weeks. She was a little peanut, 5 pounds, 11 ounces. And the biggest thing that they kept seeing was that in their mind, her sugars were not where they should be. Her glucose levels were a little lower than they wanted them to be. So she did have her closure surgery at 8 days old. And she has a fake little belly button that they made her. And then we kind of got stuck in the NICU a little longer just because her glucose levels were just not where they wanted them to be. So we had to do a fasting study and all these other studies as well as genetic testing because her omphalocele was low or was small and her glucose levels were low. They wanted to test for Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome. So we went through all of that testing as well. Um, she came back negative for BWS, but they did keep a clinical diagnosis on her. So we still go through all of those regular checkups to make sure that she doesn't have any tumor growth. Um, she was discharged we were just shy of 1 month old, almost like a couple days, to come back home to Lancaster. She was on medication for her hyperinsulinism, is what they gave her an official diagnosis of. And she unfortunately started having reactions to that medication where she would go into respiratory distress and would go blue and stop. She had this different cry. So we ended up, she was 2 months old. It was actually on election day of 2020. I remember it vividly because my husband works for the state. So he was back in the office for the first time in, almost a year. And she stopped breathing, and I had to do CPR on her in the car on our way. We were actually going to Target to get diapers. So I had to do CPR on her. We ended up back at CHOP. They did all of the testing that they possibly could and could not find any reason for her to be having these, respiratory distress issues. So then she came home, and the next day she had it again, and my brother had to do CPR on her. So we ended up back in our local hospital. And it turns out it was a reaction to this medication that she was on. I guess there's an FDA warning out that we were not aware of. So we did take her off of that medication, and she was considered cure of hyperinsulinism at that point too. So she's not really had anything past with the omphalocele past those 8 days old, really, when she was fully closed. The only thing we notice now is that She does have diastasis recti, so her muscles are not connected. So you can really see it when she tries to like do a sit up. So now we're in PT because we were noticing it was causing some issues with her strength and walking. And the only other thing, again, not really related to her O, is that she's speech delayed. So we do have her in speech therapy pretty intensively. Um, and that's she's making progress. It's just she speaks in vowels. She leaves out all her consonants. So it's really fun to try and decipher what she's saying. So she has speech therapy and PT, and then she's in a regular preschool with her regular peers and is doing really well, honestly, at 4.5 years old. The biggest piece for us right now is the speech part. And we're just trying to navigate all of that, which has been a little challenging, more so than some of the beginning stages of our journey with her. So that's kind of where we're at right now. She is going to be a big sister in July, so she's very excited about that. And I've had a very different journey with this second pregnancy for sure. So that's been very interesting. I don't know what to do without all the ultrasounds that we're used to, actually. I just said that the other day to the tech. She was like, we're gonna have you come back in 4 weeks, but it's not a big deal. It's just to check. And I was like, no, I'm good with it. I'm really good with it. I want more. So that's kind of where we're at in our journey right now. And I do ping pong a little bit back and forth, so I apologize for being a little bit scattered, but that's her journey right now.
Thank you so much for sharing and congratulations on
Hey,
your pregnancy. It's so
taken us
exciting.
a while to get to the point of wanting to go down this road again, if I'm being honest, but it's been good. So
That's very understandable. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And now we will move on to Carly. Carly is a mom of a 4.5-year-old girl, and I'm sorry, a 5-year-old girl,
Five
and she
and a
works
half.
in she works in TV production. Thank you, Carly, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Kelly, a lot of what you said kind of resonates. My daughter, we found out our diagnosis at about 12 weeks. We had a typical early ultrasound. Sorry, my dogs just came downstairs, of course. Get out, go. Um, and we were floored by the information. They really just came in, they hit you with it, and then a doctor came in and said, you need to terminate. And there was really no and I know I see this so much in the moves group, like it's, oh, you're gonna terminate, you gotta do it, you got, and I'm like, well, what are my options? Like what, so they sent us over to a geneticist and they allowed us to do a CVS test. And then we made the decision we were gonna, the CVS came out clean. So we made the decision that we were going to wait each section, wait it out, like 12 weeks. Okay, if there's maturing, if there's no, if there's no trisomy issue, if there's no, major issue like not Beckwith Wiedemann, that was actually tested for later, but we just kept going. When we had the first in fetal echo, they felt she had two VSDs and then sent us to Columbia. In obviously New Jersey, hence the T-shirt. And they sent us to Columbia at the time because we still hadn't really made a decision on our doctors yet. And the cardiologist there scanned me, and she says there's no VSDs. And I met with the cardiologist. I'm sorry, I met with the surgeon there, and I hated him. He was so cold, and so they're like, oh, your child's going to be here for a year. You're going to, this is that, so your kid might not do anything in life. I'm like, all right, I'm going to find somebody else. Thanks. So I met with CHOP. They're just a bit further from us. And I ended up getting a surgeon who was from the Cleveland Clinic who operates in New Jersey. He's now retired, but at the time he operated at the hospital of our choice, which was our local hospital, which had a phenomenal NICU. Um, the intention was always to operate on her early. Paint and weight wasn't even discussed with us. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't join this group until after my daughter was born. And a lot of information was thrown at me that I wouldn't have known at that time, one way or the other. I always thought, let's put everything back in. If she's got this big, she looks like she's got a kwashiorkor, like she's got this big belly. I didn't know. I had no idea. So our surgeon felt my husband is very, very tall. He's 6'6" and I'm 5'9", and our daughter is very long. So the plan was to operate at birth. I was going to go in for planned C-section at 37 weeks, per my OB, because they were concerned with preeclampsia. I had normal blood pressure the entire pregnancy until the day I delivered, and then it shot up, which was just like, I mean, how she chose that day, I don't know. Um, my daughter was born on room air, no problem there. She was screaming her head off, as she still does. And I saw her for a second, and she went with my husband. Um, the doctor felt the omphalocele was bigger than he thought it was going to be. He knew it was going to be giant, but he felt that the liver may have been not as much in there. However, it was full. It was full liver, bowel, and spleen. So they decided to wait a few days, let do the, I guess the mesh and the gravity to let most of it go down. I actually just read the operative report yesterday I was going through paperwork, and he said most of it actually fell back in naturally, and then he was able to close her on day 4 of life. She had no problems with oxygen. She was off a cannula by probably 2 weeks and was only intubated for surgery. Um, she was growing, she was feeding, and we were in the hospital about 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks. Um, just from a now aspect, my daughter's 5. Um, she has other medical issues that have come up. She has a chronic fever syndrome. She has a lot of little things that we never knew were related to the O, and I fought doctors over it. That's one thing that, as for somebody who has a younger child, like, you have to fight so much. And it took me 4 years to actually get something actually fixed with my daughter. And so to go back to it, she was getting these little fevers. They found she had a laryngeal cleft. They found an enlargement in her heart. They found all these like little things that actually have no relation to each other. She's had genetic testing. But the one thing that was getting frustrating is her walking was being affected, and this is where Kelly was started talking. They always said she had diastasis recti, which basically is the muscles don't cover the opening. But our original surgeon, kept saying it's going to close, it's going to close, it's going to close, and it never closed, and it kept getting wider. I mean, my daughter's belly was like here, and you could just it's her liver sitting right there, and her walking was being affected. She was put into OT, and her handwriting was being affected. She couldn't fully hold her body up swimming, where she's so close to learning to swim, and then she would just sink. Bowel control was a big issue with potty training. And we finally went to another surgeon, and he felt it was all correlated, and that the belly needed to be closed fully. So he found a hernia underneath the mesh that was in there. And in excuse me, this past December, she had another surgery, and they fixed the hernia. They removed the mesh, and the muscle was pulled 6 inches across her belly and tied in the center. So she is solid muscle. It's unbelievable. I wish I had muscle like that. Um, and she is the happiest 5-year-old kid you could ever meet. She's upstairs pretending she's Tinkerbell right now for the dogs. She's the only from a developmental standpoint, the only issue we've run into is she does have an IEP. Um, they are calling it PTSD related because she's had so many hospital stays and so many doctor visits that she literally got called up for a hearing test at school, and she started to cry because she says, I don't want them to take blood. I don't want them to take. She doesn't understand that just going to the doctor doesn't mean something bad is going to happen, and that breaks my heart. So she gets a lot of one-on-one attention with work, which to me is great because she's doing wonderfully with it. She's doing beautifully. And she's, like I said, she's a happy, bright, sweet kid who sometimes I want to throw into a wall. But she's unfortunately the miniature version of me. So, but she's doing awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. We will move on to Liana now. Liana is a mom to a 4.5-year-old boy. She is a certified behavior analyst. Oh, we can't hear you, Liana. I don't know if you're muted. Yeah, we have no sound. Do you want to maybe try to come out and come back in?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yep.
Okay. All right. I had the microphone on my AirPods for some reason. That's why. Yeah, so my name is Liana. I live in Maine now. At the time, I lived in Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. Um, a lot like Kelly, I had a lot of bleeding in the beginning of my pregnancy, and I had a miscarriage prior to my O baby. So I started seeing or getting ultrasounds like right at 5 weeks. And so it was around 10 and a half weeks that it was suspected that he had an omphalocele. And then at 11 or 12 weeks, it was confirmed. We did find out it was a large um, omphalocele or giant omphalocele as well. And I was very closely watched through the whole pregnancy. We had some, I guess, MRIs and everything at Boston Children's Hospital. Um, and then it was during the pandemic, so it was a very lonely time. And so a lot of times when I would go in, I was alone. When I went to the children's hospital, though, they let my husband in, which was kind of strange. But anyways, so we also found out around 20 weeks that he had a VSD, ASD that they suspected, and it was confirmed a little closer towards the his due date, when they could do like an echo on the baby. So I had a planned C-section at 38 weeks, 4 days. And one of the biggest things that our surgeon was worried about is lung development because his contained 90% of his liver, 50% of his stomach, his whole gallbladder, and then part of his intestines. But when he came out, he screamed so loud, and he still screams to this day. He has a very good set of lungs. So we knew that his lungs were fine. Um, he did stay in the NICU for 21 days. His issue a lot was to gain weight. And then we were moved to like just the regular like room. So we spent a total of 8 weeks in the hospital. Then I'm trying to think, at 12 or 4 months, he did have surgery for the inguinal, I think that's how you pronounce it, hernias, because they didn't want to close anything until that was done. And then at 6 months, he had his full closure surgery. And his surgeon wasn't even sure if they were going to be able to do it, just because he was still pretty small. And the plan was if they needed to, they would just do like the mesh and then close the muscles at a later time. But they were able to close everything for him. Our biggest issue was weight gain. He was always very, very tiny. He still is tiny. But we started with an NG tube when he was born, and then he was still like vomiting all the time, and they just could not keep anything down. So it ended up turning into like the NJ tube. So it bypassed the stomach, and then we were doing that for a long time until his closure surgery, and then he got the G tube. Um, Even after the closure surgery, again, we had issues with gaining weight. And so we did a lot of stints in the hospital, but it was mostly due to feeding issues after his O was closed. And then he also had a speech delay. So I did early intervention with him right away. He could start even as a baby. And then got him into speech, and he had an IEP. He had a lot of eating issues. Part of my specialist as being a behavior analyst, I was able to work on that. He now eats anything. He has no eating issues at all. But back then, you would have never thought he would have ate food. Thought he was going to be a baby that would needed the feeding tube. And now he's just a typical 4.5-year-old. Sassy, very sweet, but very, very sassy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. We'll go ahead and stop the recording now, and then we can open it up for some questions.